The mahogany casket was still being lowered into the ground when the stranger appeared at the edge of the cemetery, holding a DNA test that would shatter the Blackwood empire. But it wasn't the test results that made everyone freeze. It was the blood-red rose he tossed onto the coffin, the same calling card the deceased had received every year on the anniversary of a crime no one dared speak about. The rain had just started to fall on Rosehaven Cemetery when Thomas Blackwood noticed the man in the charcoal coat standing beyond the mourners, while senators, CEOs, and judges huddled under black umbrellas around his father's grave. This stranger stood exposed to the elements, water streaming down his scarred face. "Who the hell is that?" Thomas whispered to his sister Catherine, who clutched her husband's arm tighter. "I don't know, but security should—" The stranger stepped forward, his boots squelching in the mud. The crowd parted instinctively, something about his presence commanding space. He reached into his coat, and Thomas saw Secret Service agents tense, hands moving to concealed weapons. But instead of a weapon, the man pulled out a manila envelope wrapped in plastic against the rain. 30 years. The stranger's voice carried despite the weather, rough as gravel. 30 years I waited for Reginald Blackwood to die naturally. 30 years of watching him play philanthropist while my family rotted. Thomas stepped forward, trying to shield his mother Vivian from whatever was coming. "This is a private funeral. You need to leave." The stranger's laugh was hollow. "Private? Nothing about the Blackwoods is private. Your father made sure of that when he destroyed my family." He held up the envelope. "DNA test. Seems your daddy had more children than just you three legitimate heirs." Catherine's gasp was audible even over the rain. Their younger brother James, who'd been silent until now, moved closer. "You're lying." "Am I?" He tossed the envelope at Thomas's feet, then pulled out the rose. "Your father knew this day would come. Why do you think he had 3 heart attacks in 5 years? Guilt is a killer." He dropped the rose on the coffin, the red stark against the polished wood. "Tell your mother Dmitri Kozlov's son says hello. Tell her the debt isn't buried with her husband." Lightning cracked across the sky as the stranger turned and walked away, leaving the Blackwood family standing in stunned silence around their patriarch's grave. Thomas bent to pick up the envelope, his hands shaking as he saw the laboratory seal was authentic. "Thomas," his mother's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Bring that to the car, now." As the funeral dissolved into chaos, whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire, Thomas noticed something that chilled him more than the stranger's words. His mother wasn't surprised. Shocked, yes. Angry, certainly. But not surprised. The DNA test was real, 99.97% match. But it was the second document in the envelope that made Thomas Blackwood's hands shake. A contract signed in blood, dated 30 years ago, promising half of everything to the firstborn son, legitimate or not. The Blackwood Estate's library had never felt smaller. 20,000 square feet of old money and older secrets, and still Thomas felt the walls closing in as his family gathered around the ancient oak table. "It's authentic," Margaret Steele, their family lawyer, confirmed, setting down her magnifying glass. "The blood signature, the witnesses, even the notary seal. Your father signed this." "Under duress, obviously," Catherine snapped, pacing behind her chair. "A blood signature? What is this, the Middle Ages?" In certain circles, their mother Vivian spoke for the first time since the cemetery. Blood contracts still carry weight. The Kozlov family, they were old-world Russian. They believed in such things. James looked up from his phone where he'd been researching. Dmitri Kozlov died in a warehouse fire 30 years ago, along with his wife and daughter. Only the son survived. Police ruled it an accident. "Police ruled what your father paid them to rule." Vivian's voice was bitter. I told him not to get involved with the Russians, but the construction contracts, the union connections, he couldn't resist. Thomas stared at his mother. You knew about this? I knew your father had business with Kozlov. I didn't know about, she gestured at the papers, this, or the boy. Man, Catherine corrected. He's our age now, and apparently our brother. Half-brother, James muttered, if we believe him. Margaret cleared her throat. The DNA test is from a reputable lab, but more concerning is this contract. In combination with the test, he has a legitimate claim to half the estate. How much are we talking about? Thomas asked, though he already knew. Current valuations? About $6 billion. The hotels, the construction empire, the offshore accounts, half of everything. The room erupted, Catherine shouting about lawyers and challenges, James frantically texting their PR team, Vivian sitting silent as a statue. But Thomas noticed something else, a second envelope that had been tucked inside the first, smaller, older. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, his father, young and smiling, standing with a beautiful woman and 2 children. The boy in the photo had the same scarred face as their cemetery visitor, though the scars were fresh then, still bleeding. On the back, in his father's handwriting, "The family I destroyed. May God forgive me." Jesus, Thomas breathed. There's more, Margaret said quietly. I've been going through your father's private files. There are payments, 30 years of payments to various accounts, all traced back to one name, Alexei Kozlov. He's been watching you all, waiting. For what? Catherine demanded. The lights in the library suddenly cut out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. Then every phone in the room chimed simultaneously. The message was simple. The sins of the father shall be visited upon the children. You have 72 hours to transfer my inheritance, or I start collecting in other ways. Attached was a video file. Thomas played it, his blood running cold as he watched security footage from each of their homes, their offices, their children's schools, all recorded within the last 24 hours. He's been watching us, James whispered. No, Vivian stood, her face hard as marble. He's been hunting us, and now that Reginald is dead, nothing's stopping him from taking his revenge. She turned to Margaret. Call our security, all of it, and get me Nikolai Volkov's number. The arms dealer? Margaret looked shocked. Vivian, you can't. I can and I will. If Alexei Kozlov wants to play by old world rules, then we'll remind him that the Blackwoods didn't build this empire by playing nice. She looked at her children. Your father may have started this war, but I'll be damned if I let his bastard finish it. The Blackwood Industries board meeting was supposed to be routine until the lights cut out and the emergency exit sealed, trapping 15 of the city's most powerful people in a room with a man who'd spent 30 years learning how to destroy them all. Catherine Blackwood was in the middle of her presentation about quarterly projections when the boardroom's reinforced windows suddenly went opaque, military-grade blackout shields slamming into place. The board members, titans of industry worth billions, looked around in confusion that quickly turned to fear. What's happening? Senator Morrison demanded, reaching for his phone. No signal. Technical difficulty, Catherine lied smoothly, though her hand trembled as she reached for the emergency button under the table. Nothing. I'm sure security will... Security is taking a break. The voice came from the speakers, and Catherine recognized it immediately. Alexei Kozlov, their half-brother. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm the son Reginald Blackwood tried to burn alive 30 years ago. The heir he pretended didn't exist. And as of, 3 minutes ago, the majority shareholder of Blackwood Industries. Impossible, board member Patricia Chen snapped. Share transfers require board approval, not for inherited shares, not when the transfer was pre-authorized by Reginald himself in a moment of, let's call it conscience. Papers began sliding out from the printer in the corner, 1 copy for each board member. You'll find everything in order, signed, sealed, and very legally binding. Catherine grabbed a copy, scanning it frantically. Her father's signature was unmistakable, dated just a week before his death. Now then, Alexei continued, let's discuss the real business. The Kozlov warehouses you burned, the union leaders you had killed, the families you destroyed to build this empire. That's slander. Morrison stood, his face purple. You can't prove... The main screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from 1994. Young Reginald Blackwood shaking hands with a man Catherine recognized from the photograph, Dmitry Kozlov. Then the scene shifted. The same warehouse, engulfed in flames. A figure running inside, emerging with 2 children. The boy's face burning, scarring. My father saved us, broke his agreement with yours to go back for his family. Your father locked the doors from the outside. More footage. Police reports being altered, money changing hands. A young prosecutor, now Senator Morrison, classifying the case as an accident. You all knew it, Alexei continued. Every one of you profited from it. Chen, your construction company got the contracts. Morrison, you got your political career. Williams, Davies, Ashford, every member of this board has blood on their hands. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Catherine noticed several board members reaching for concealed weapons, a testament to the kind of people her father had surrounded himself with. What do you want? She asked, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. Justice. But I'll settle for confession. Each of you will record a statement admitting your part in the cover-up. Then you'll resign, liquidate your shares at market price, to me, and disappear. Or, Morrison challenged, or the FBI receives copies of everything, the real books, the offshore accounts, the bodies you thought were buried deep enough. Oh, and the room you're in, I had it modified. Right now you're breathing a very specific mixture of gases, harmless at current levels. But if I don't input a code every 15 minutes, several board members were already at the doors pounding uselessly against reinforced steel. You're insane, Patricia Chen shouted. No, I'm motivated. You have 14 minutes to decide. Confess and live to spend your remaining wealth in exile. Or refuse and explain to federal prosecutors why there are 30 years of evidence in your personal files. Evidence I've spent half my life planting. Catherine's phone, the only one suddenly working, rang. Thomas's name on the screen. Cat, are you okay? He's got James. Took him from his apartment. Mom's mobilizing everything, but he's here, she whispered. In the building. He's... The line went dead. On the screen, a timer appeared, 13:47 and counting. I'll give you a moment to discuss. Though, really, what's there to discuss? You built your empires on the ashes of my family. Time to see how well they burn.
Vivian Blackwood had buried 7 husbands before Reginald, each death perfectly natural, perfectly timed, perfectly profitable. But as she descended into the abandoned subway tunnel where Alexei held her youngest son, she wondered if the family curse of betrayal would finally claim her too. The Riverside Station had been closed since the 70s, a forgotten artery beneath the city where homeless camps and worse things flourished. Vivian moved through the darkness with practiced ease, her Louboutins silent on the rusted tracks. Behind her, Nikolai Volkov's men spread out like shadows, professionals who didn't ask questions about why Manhattan's most elegant widow knew her way through urban decay. James is in the old control room, Nikolai's voice crackled through her earpiece. Alexei has 4 men with him, all ex-Spetsnaz. Your people? Once, before he offered them better pay. A pause. Vivian, this boy is not a boy. He's Dimitri's son, trained from birth for this moment. She stepped over a dead rat without flinching, just as I was trained for mine. She thought of her 7 previous husbands as she walked. The pharmaceutical executive who developed a sudden allergy, the senator who'd mixed the wrong medications, the ambassador who'd fallen from his yacht. Each had served their purpose, advancing her position, growing her power. Reginald was supposed to be the last, the empire she'd spent decades building, finally complete. Then his bastard appeared. Movement ahead, one of Volkov's men reported. She saw him first, James, tied to a chair in the glassed control booth, unconscious but breathing. And beside him, the scarred face she'd been seeing in her nightmares since the funeral. Mrs. Blackwood, or should I say Mrs. Petrova, Mrs. Chen, Mrs. Morrison, you've had so many names. She stepped into the light, letting him see her clearly. Vivian will do. You have something of mine. And you have something of mine, $6 billion to be exact. Your math is off. The blood contract specified half of Reginald's assets, but most of those assets were never his. She smiled, the expression that had disarmed 7 husbands. They were mine, accumulated through my previous marriages, protected by ironclad prenuptials. Your father's contract is worth, perhaps, $300 million. Substantial, but hardly the fortune you expected. He saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He'd done his research, but not deeply enough. The Blackwood Empire was built on her foundations, her connections, her carefully orchestrated deaths. You're lying. Am I? She pulled out a tablet, showing him financial records going back 40 years. Every major asset, every significant holding, all traceable to my acquisitions before I met your father. He was a convenient frontman, nothing more. Then why did he sign the contract? Because he was guilty, weak. He thought money could absolve him of burning your family. She stepped closer, noting how his men tensed. But you don't want money, do you, Alexei? You want what I wanted at your age. Recognition, legitimacy, a seat at the table. I want justice. No, you want revenge. There's a difference. She gestured to James. Kill my son, destroy my family, and what do you have? A moment's satisfaction and a lifetime running from my retribution. Or, she let the word hang, seeing she had his attention. Or you take your place as a Blackwood, publicly acknowledged, your share of Reginald's actual assets, a position in the company, the legitimacy your mother wanted for you. She paused. And my mentorship in how to truly destroy those who wronged your family. You'd help me? I'd teach you. There are board members, politicians, judges who were complicit in your family's death. Reginald is gone, but they remain. Work with me and we'll dismantle them together, legally, financially, completely. She saw him wavering and pressed on. Your father taught you old-world revenge, blood and bullets, effective but messy. I can teach you new-world destruction, leveraged buyouts, political scandals, social annihilation. Which do you think hurts more? And your children? Will accept you or be disinherited. I've buried 7 husbands, Alexei. My children know better than to cross me. He studied her for a long moment. You're more dangerous than Reginald ever was. Yes, she agreed simply. I am. The question is, do you want me as an enemy or a teacher? The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Finally, Alexei nodded to his men. They began untying James. One condition, he said. The people who killed my family, I want them all. Vivian's smile was sharp as a blade. My dear boy, I've been keeping files on them for 30 years. Welcome to the family business. The press conference was supposed to introduce Alexei Kozlov as the newly discovered Blackwood heir. Instead, it became a bloodbath when the chandelier exploded, raining Christum and secrets onto the crowd of reporters who'd come to witness the family's carefully orchestrated lie. Thomas Blackwood stood at the podium, his prepared statement trembling in his hands as crystal shards embedded themselves in the walls around him. Through the chaos of screaming reporters and security rushing in, he saw a figure in the balcony, not Alexei, who stood frozen beside their mother, but someone else, someone familiar. Get down! Alexei was the first to react, pulling Vivian behind the podium as another explosion rocked the ballroom.
Thomas found himself face to face with his supposed half-brother, both crouched behind marble as bullets started flying. Up close, he could see the calculation in his scarred face. This wasn't his attack. "Friends of yours," Thomas gasped. "Enemies of your mother's, more likely." Alexei pulled out a phone, his fingers flying across the screen. 7 husbands, 7 fortunes, dozens of enemies. Did you think they'd all stay quiet when she publicly adopted their killer's son? Catherine's scream cut through the chaos. Thomas saw her being dragged toward a service exit by men in tactical gear, James already unconscious over one shoulder. "The Morettis," Vivian said calmly, checking the pearl-handled pistol she'd pulled from her clutch. "Vincent's family. I knew they'd make a move eventually." Vincent was husband number 5, Alexei supplied, seeing Thomas's confusion. "Died in a car accident, brake failure." "Alleged brake failure," Vivian corrected, then fired 3 shots at the balcony with surprising accuracy. Vincent's brother Carlo never believed it. More armed men poured in through the shattered windows. Thomas realized with growing horror that this wasn't a simple attack, it was a coordinated assault by multiple parties. He recognized faces from the society pages, the Morrison clan, the Chen family's enforcers, even representatives from the Volkov Bratva who'd apparently decided to switch sides. "Mother," Thomas grabbed Vivian's arm. "What did you do?" "What I had to do to build this empire." She ejected her empty magazine with practiced ease. Each husband's death benefited someone, until now. Bringing Alexei public was supposed to consolidate power, show strength. Instead, you united your enemies, Alexei finished. He turned to Thomas. "Your mother promised to teach me about New World revenge. Lesson 1, every empire has a foundation of bodies. Lesson 2, eventually they start to smell." The lights cut out, a different darkness than Alexei's orchestrated blackouts. This felt more final, more complete. In the darkness, Thomas heard his mother's voice, different now, younger, deadlier. "Alexei, take Thomas through the kitchen. Service tunnel leads to the parking garage. Nikolai's men are waiting." "What about Catherine and James?" "I'll handle it." The sound of her heels clicking on marble, moving away. "This is my mess to clean up." "Our mess now," Alexei said quietly. "That's what family means, doesn't it?" A spotlight suddenly blazed from the balcony, illuminating them. Thomas saw the sniper's red dot center on Alexei's chest, then shift to him, wavering between brothers. "Choose," a voice boomed from above. Carlo Moretti, Thomas recognized. "The bastard or the hare? One dies, one lives. You have 10 seconds." Thomas felt Alexei tense beside him, ready to move, to fight or sacrifice himself. Thomas couldn't tell. But in that moment, crouched in crystalline chaos, he made a decision that would have shocked him a week ago. "Neither," Thomas shouted, then grabbed Alexei and rolled them both behind a fallen table as bullets sparked where they'd been. He heard Alexei's sharp intake of breath, felt the man's surprise, then unexpectedly, a laugh. "Your mother was right," Alexei said, pulling out a second gun and handing it to Thomas. "You Blackwoods are more dangerous than you look." "Half Blackwood," Thomas corrected, checking the weapon with hands that somehow weren't shaking. "But apparently that's enough." Together, they began fighting their way toward the kitchen, covering each other's movements with an instinct that felt strangely natural. Behind them, they could hear their mother's voice over the intercom, cold and commanding, orchestrating a defense that would become a legend in the underworld. The Blackwood Empire might have been built on betrayal, but its survival would depend on something entirely else, the alliance between a legitimate son who'd just discovered his family's darkness and a bastard who'd spent his life in it. As they reached the service tunnel, Thomas realized the press conference had succeeded in ways no one expected. The world now knew about Alexei Kozlov. They just didn't know that he might be the only thing standing between the Blackwoods and complete annihilation.
The safe room beneath Blackwood Tower was supposed to be impenetrable. Titanium walls, filtered air, supplies for a month. But as Vivian watched the security feeds showing her children being hunted through the city, she realized the real trap was the one she'd built herself over 40 years and 7 bodies. Vivian Blackwood sat in her underground fortress, watching her empire burn on a dozen screens.
The Morettis had Catherine in a warehouse in Queens. The Chens had James in a shipping container at the docks. The Morrisons were systematically destroying every political connection she'd cultivated. And somewhere in the city, Thomas and Alexei were running for their lives. Her phone, one of many, rang. Carlo Moretti's voice slithered through. 7 hours, Vivian. Transfer everything to the families you wronged, or we start sending pieces of your children back. She ended the call without responding, her fingers already dancing across keyboards. 40 years of contingencies, hidden accounts, sleeper assets, all activated now. But would it be enough? Another screen showed footage from her past, her first husband, the pharmaceutical executive, taking the pills she'd contaminated. Her second, the ambassador, falling from his yacht after she'd drugged his wine. Each death had been perfect, undetectable, advancing her agenda. "Ma'am," Nikolai Volkov's voice crackled through the secure line. "I've lost contact with the team protecting your sons. Pull back all assets to the tower, full defensive positions." "And your other children?" Vivian stared at Catherine on the screen, bloodied but defiant as Carlo Moretti circled her like a shark. At James, unconscious and vulnerable. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could save them, transfer the money, admit her crimes, disappear. Or she could preserve the empire, let her children pay for her sins, and rebuild with Alexei, the one child who understood the necessity of darkness. "Vivian," a new voice on the intercom. Alexei, somehow accessing her secure channel. "I know what you're thinking. Don't." "How did you—" "Your security was designed by Dmitry Kozlov's people, my people now. You're calculating odds, weighing losses, but you're missing something. Enlighten me. They don't just want your money. They want your confession, public admission of every murder, every crime. They want to destroy the idea of Vivian Blackwood, not just the woman." She knew he was right. Paying wouldn't save her children. It would only add their bodies to her foundation. "There's another way," Alexei continued, "but it requires trust. Can you trust the bastard son of the man your husband burned alive?" She laughed, surprising herself. "At this point, you might be the only person in New York I can trust. What do you need?" "Full access. Everything. Financial codes, blackmail files, the location of the real bodies." A pause. "And the truth about what happened to my mother." Her hand stilled on the keyboard. "Your mother? She didn't die in the fire. I remember her screaming, but not burning. Someone took her." His voice hardened. "Was it you?" Vivian closed her eyes, remembering that night 30 years ago. The warehouse burning, Reginald panicking, and her making a calculated decision that would haunt them all. "Yes," she admitted. "I saved her. Used her as leverage to keep Reginald from retaliating. She's alive, Alexei, and has been all this time." Silence on the line. Then, "Where?" She opened a file she'd never shared with anyone. Coordinates to a facility in Switzerland. "Save my children, and I'll reunite you with her. You had my mother for 30 years, and you're using her as a bargaining chip? I kept her alive for 30 years when Reginald wanted her dead. I gave her comfort, care, a new identity." Vivian's voice turned steel. "I'm not a good person, but I'm not a monster. Your mother is free to leave whenever she wants. She stays because she knows you're alive, and I promise to protect you from the others." "The others?" "The families who wanted all the Kozlovs dead, not just Dmitry. Your mother and I have an understanding. She stays hidden, I keep you safe. Until now." Another explosion somewhere in the building. The lights flickered but held. "Send me everything," Alexei said finally. "And Vivian, when this is over, we're going to have a very different conversation about family. I look forward to it, assuming we survive." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, transmitting decades of secrets to the son of her enemy, trusting him with weapons that could destroy her. On the screens, she watched her children's captors receiving calls, their faces shifting from triumph to confusion to fear. Alexei Kozlov was about to show them all why the sins of the mother were nothing compared to the wrath of a son scorned.
The abandoned Kozlov Industries building had stood empty for 30 years, a burnt monument to betrayal. Until tonight, when every crime family in New York received the same message. Come collect your pound of flesh. Signed with a blood thumbprint they all recognized. Alexei stood in what had been his father's office, the walls still bearing scorch marks from the fire that started it all. Through the broken windows he could see them arriving, convoy after convoy of black SUVs, each carrying representatives of the families Vivian Blackwood had wronged. "They're all coming," Thomas said from beside him, checking the surveillance feeds on his tablet. "The Murrays, Chens, Morrisons, even the smaller families. You sure about this?" "Your mother's files were very detailed," Alexei replied, adjusting the explosives vest he wore. "Every crime, every cover-up, every dirty secret. They'll come because they can't afford not to." "And Catherine and James?" "Already extracted. Your mother's sleeper assets were more extensive than even I imagined." He smiled grimly. "She had people inside every family waiting for activation. 30 years of insurance policies." The elevator, somehow still functional, chimed, the first group arriving. Carlo Moretti stepped out with 6 men, all armed, all suspicious. "Kozlov. This better not be a trap." "No trap, just a proposition." Alexei gestured to the conference table he'd set up in the center of the ruined office. "Please, sit. The others will arrive shortly." Within minutes, the room filled with the most dangerous people in New York. Patricia Chen, matriarch of the Chen Syndicate, Senator Morrison with his political fixers, representatives from 5 other families, all with blood debts against the Blackwoods. "You have our attention," Patricia said coldly. "Speak." Alexei activated a holographic projector, stolen from Blackwood Industries. Vivian's files bloomed in the air, a constellation of crimes. "Everything you think you know about Vivian Blackwood is true," he began. "She killed your family members. Vincent Moretti, brake failure. David Chen, poisoned sushi. Robert Morrison, insulin overdose. All murders, all her." The room erupted in angry voices, but Alexei raised his hand, showing the dead man's switch in his palm. "However," Alexei continued calmly, "what you don't know is why. Each death was orchestrated not just for her gain, but to prevent something worse. Vincent Moretti was selling children. David Chen was about to start a war that would have destroyed half of the families here. Robert Morrison was feeding information to the FBI. "Lies!" Carlos snarled. "Proof." Alexei gestured, and the hologram shifted, showing documents, recordings, evidence that Vivian had gathered before each kill. She wasn't just a Black Widow. She was a gardener, pruning the diseased branches before they could infect the whole tree. "Even if that's true," Patricia said slowly, "she had no right." "No," Alexei agreed, "she didn't. Which is why I am proposing something different. A new structure. No more shadow wars, no more revenge cycles. The Kozlov Accord." He laid out his vision, a council of families, equal representation, shared territories, mutual protection. The Blackwood Empire's resources split among them all, but managed collectively. No single family could dominate. No individual could become another Vivian. "And what about her?" Morrison demanded.
She just walks away? She disappears permanently, along with her files on all of you, files that would destroy every family here if released. His scarred face was impassive. You get justice through her exile and profit through cooperation. Or you can try to take revenge, and I release everything to the FBI before this vest turns us all into memories. You're bluffing, Carlos said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Am I? Alexei pulled out a phone, showing a timer. 15 servers around the world set to upload unless I input a code every hour. Your choice, evolve or extinction. Thomas stepped forward. The Blackwood family agrees to these terms. Our mother's crimes die with her old life. We start fresh, all of us. The bastard and the heir united. Patricia mused. Your mother raised you well. You learned to survive. One by one, the families agreed, not from trust or forgiveness, but from pragmatism. The alternative, mutual destruction, served no one. As they signed the accords, Alexei felt his phone vibrate. A message from Vivian. Well played. The car is waiting. He showed it to Thomas, who nodded. Their mother would disappear tonight, taking her secrets with her. Justice of a sort, even if not the kind anyone had originally wanted. One more thing, Alexei announced as the families prepared to leave. The Kozlov building will be rebuilt, a neutral ground for all families, a reminder that from ashes something better can grow. Carlo Moretti was the last to leave, pausing at the elevator. Your father would be proud, Kozlov. You got your revenge without firing a shot. No, Alexei corrected. I got something better. I got a future. As the room emptied, Thomas turned to his half-brother. Think it will hold? With your sister's legal mind, your brother's connections, and our mother's files as insurance, it might. Alexei looked around the burned office one last time. Besides, we're all too invested now to let it fail. They left together, brothers forged in crisis, walking out of the past and into an uncertain but unified future. Behind them, the Kozlov building stood ready for rebirth, a monument no longer to betrayal but to the possibility of redemption, even for the children of monsters.
The Swiss clinic looked like a paradise. Mountain views, pristine gardens, luxury suites. But as Vivian Blackwood walked through its halls for the last time, she knew it was really a prison she'd built for two women who'd spent 30 years waiting for this moment. Vivian found her in the solarium, as always. Elena Kozlov, aged but still beautiful, tending to roses that bloomed despite the alpine climate. The woman who should have died in a warehouse fire 3 decades ago looked up with eyes that held no surprise. "He found you," Elena said simply. It wasn't a question. "Your son is remarkable," Vivian replied, sitting across from her oldest victim and strangest friend. "He united the families, brought peace where I only brought death." The fire gave him those scars. Elena touched her own face, unmarred but haunted. But you gave him the anger that forged him into what he is. They sat in silence, two mothers who'd shaped history through their choices. The clinic staff, discreet and well-paid, continued their rounds as if this meeting wasn't the culmination of 30 years of careful planning. "I kept my promise," Vivian said quietly. "Protected him, guided him from the shadows, even when it meant letting him hate me." Elena nodded. "And now, he's strong enough to not need either of us." She set down her pruning shears. "The question is, are we strong enough to let go?" They walked together through the clinic's gardens, two women who'd been enemies, then prisoners, then something stranger, conspirators in a plan 3 decades in the making. "The families will honor the Kozlov Accord," Vivian said. Alexei made sure of that. Your son has his father's strength but his mother's wisdom. And your ruthlessness, Elena added, without accusation. You taught him well through your crimes. Every murder you committed, every family you destroyed, he studied them all, learned how power really works. They sat on a bench overlooking the valley, sitting in comfortable silence. The years had worn down their hatred into something more complex. Respect, perhaps, or recognition of kindred spirits. "Where will you go?" Elena asked. "Does it matter? Vivian Blackwood dies tonight. Whoever I become tomorrow." She shrugged. "Perhaps someone who doesn't need to kill to survive." "And your children?" "Will thrive without me. Thomas has Alexei now, a brother who understands both sides of power. Catherine has her confession and her conscience. James has his freedom from my shadow. They're better off believing I'm a monster who fled rather than knowing the full truth." "Which is?" Elena asked. "That every death was calculated to prevent a war. That I built an empire on bodies to keep worse monsters from rising. That I... Listen to me, still justifying. Your son was right. There's no clean end to a dirty story. No. But there can be a new beginning." A car appeared on the winding mountain road, unmarked, untraceable. Vivian's extraction, arranged by contacts even Alexei didn't know about. "Will you tell him?" Vivian asked as she stood. "About his mother being alive?" "When he's ready, when the accord is stable and he doesn't need revenge to define him." Elena smiled sadly. "You gave me 30 years to prepare for this moment. I can give him time to prepare for me." Vivian pulled out a phone, showing Elena a bank account. "The clinic is paid for indefinitely. The staff will stay as long as you need. When you're ready to leave, I know how to disappear. You taught me well." They embraced briefly, awkwardly. Two others who'd shaped a generation through their choices, dark and light. As Vivian walked toward the waiting car, Elena called out, "Your children don't need to know the full truth, but they should know this. Everything you did it believing it would protect them." "Belief doesn't absolve sin," Vivian replied, without turning. "No? But love might explain it." The car door closed, and Vivian Blackwood vanished into the Swiss night. Behind her, Elena Kozlov returned to her roses, preparing for the day her son would finally come to claim his birthright. Not money or revenge, but the mother he thought he'd lost. In New York, the Kozlov Accord held. The families, bound by mutual blackmail and shared profit, began the slow work of legitimizing their empires. Thomas and Alexei worked side by side, brothers in all but blood, rebuilding on foundations of honesty rather than murder. And somewhere in the world, a woman who'd been many things, killer, widow, mother, monster, became nothing and no one, finally free from the weight of the empire she'd built on graves. The Blackwood name would survive, cleansed by confession and renewed by alliance. But Vivian herself became what she'd always been best at being, a ghost, a whisper, a cautionary tale about the price of power. In the end, perhaps that was justice enough.
6 months after the Kozlov Accord, the renovated warehouse stood gleaming in the Manhattan skyline. But as the 5 families gathered for the opening ceremony, no one expected the real guest of honor, a woman everyone thought had died in a fire 30 years ago. Thomas Blackwood stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd gathered in what had once been the site of New York's greatest tragedy. The Kozlov Industries building, rebuilt from the ashes, now housed the unified operations of the 5 families. Where fire had once destroyed, cooperation now built. Today marks not just a building opening, but a new chapter in our shared history. Where our fathers sowed discord,
we plant partnership. Where they built on blood, we build on... The main doors opened, silencing him mid-sentence. A woman entered, elderly but elegant, her face unmistakable to those who'd studied the old photographs. Elena Kozlov, ghost made flesh. Alexei rose from his seat so fast his chair toppled. "Mother?" She moved through the frozen crowd with grace, her eyes never leaving her sun-scarred face. "My beautiful boy, my survivor." The reunion broke something in Alexei. 30 years of hardness cracking as he embraced the mother he'd thought burned alive. Around them, the families watched in stunned silence, understanding that this moment was bigger than their accords and alliances. "How?" Alexei's voice was raw. "That's a conversation for later," Elena said softly. "Today is about the future, not the past." Catherine found her voice first. "Mrs. Kozlov, we're honored." "Please," Elena interrupted gently. "I'm here as a mother, not a matriarch. My son has built something extraordinary without me. I'm just here to witness it." But her presence changed everything. The older generation, those who remembered Dmitry Kozlov's integrity before Reginald's betrayal, saw in her a bridge between past and future. The younger generation saw living proof that survival and forgiveness were possible. The ceremony continued, but the energy had shifted. When Alexei spoke about unity and justice, his words carried new weight with his mother beside him. When the family signed the permanent charter, Elena's witness signature made it feel like a blessing rather than just business. Later, in a private room overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the Blackwood siblings sat with Alexei and Elena. The truth came out in pieces. Vivian's rescue, the years of hidden protection, the careful orchestration of Alexei's rise. "She saved you?" James asked, struggling to reconcile this with the mother he thought he knew. "She saved me to control me," Elena corrected. "But in doing so, she gave me time to heal, to plan, to ensure my son had the tools he'd need." She looked at each of them. "Your mother was a complicated woman, neither devil nor angel, but something more dangerous, a pragmatist with a conscience she couldn't quite kill." "Do you know where she is?" Thomas asked. Elena shook her head. "She's gone, truly gone. That was our agreement. She would disappear completely, and I would help you all build something better from the ruins." "And you're staying?" Catherine's voice held hope. "For now. This old woman has some wisdom to share, and perhaps some grandmothering to catch up on." She smiled at Alexei. "If my son will have me." "Always," Alexei said simply. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the rebuilt warehouse in gold, the two families, Blackwood and Kozlov, sat together planning a future neither their fathers nor mothers could have imagined. Not perfect, not without scars, but honest in its intentions. The empire built on betrayal had become a federation built on truth. And in that transformation, perhaps both Vivian Blackwood and Dmitry Kozlov could finally rest, their children having found a way to honor the best of their legacies while burying the worst. Elena raised a glass of vodka, Russian tradition demanding a toast. "To the children who survived their parents' sins. May you build something worthy of your scars." They drank, and in that moment, the last ghosts of the past finally began to fade. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. And somewhere in the world, a woman without a name read about the ceremony in an encrypted newsfeed, allowed herself one moment of pride, and then deleted all traces and disappeared deeper into her chosen exile.
1 year after the Kozlov Accord, the 5 families had built an empire of legitimate power, until the FBI raid at dawn, led by an agent whose own family had been destroyed by Vivian Blackwood, proved that some ghosts refused to stay buried. The tactical teams hit all 5 family compounds simultaneously at 4:47 a.m. Thomas Blackwood woke to flashbang grenades and federal agents streaming through his bedroom, while across the city, the same scene played out for every signatory of the Kozlov Accord. But it was the lead agent who made Thomas's blood run cold. Special Agent Diana Morrison, daughter of the senator Vivian had murdered 15 years ago. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her smile sharp with satisfaction, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, and murder. The Kozlov Accord, we've had it from day one, your mother's final gift to us." In the federal building's interrogation room, the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Vivian hadn't just disappeared, she'd made a deal. Every crime, every recording, every secret the families thought buried had been delivered to the FBI in exchange for her immunity and disappearance. "She played you all," Diana said, spreading files across the table. 30 years of murders, and she walks free while you pay for her crimes. How does it feel to be your mother's final victims?" Thomas stared at his mother's signed testimony, dated the night she vanished. Every detail, every death, every family secret laid bare. But something felt wrong. Vivian was many things, but never sloppy. "You're lying," he said suddenly. "This isn't her signature." Diana's smile flickered. "Expert analysis says, experts can be bought. I know my mother's hand." He looked closer. "This is good, but it's not perfect. Who really gave you this?" Before Diana could respond, the lights went out. Not just in the interrogation room. The entire federal building plunged into darkness. Emergency power failed to engage. In the chaos, he heard a familiar voice over the intercom. "Hello, children." Vivian. But not from a recording, live, present, in the building. "Agent Morrison, I believe you have something of mine. Several somethings, actually. My children, their chosen family, and a rather crude forgery of my confession." Diana grabbed her radio, but it was dead. Everything electronic was dead. "See, I've been watching. When someone started feeding you information in my name, I grew curious. The real puppet master isn't me, dear. It's someone with a much older grudge." The emergency lights finally flickered on, revealing a figure in the doorway. Not Vivian, but Elena Kozlov, holding an FBI badge. Deep cover for 31 years. Even my son didn't know. The fire, the exile, Vivian's protection, all to position me for this moment. Thomas felt the world tilt. "Your FBI?" "FSB originally, then CIA. Now," Elena shrugged, "now I'm just a mother tired of watching her son suffer for other people's crimes." Diana drew her weapon, but Elena was faster, not with violence, but with words. "Check your files, Agent Morrison, the real ones. Your father wasn't murdered by Vivian. He was selling state secrets to the Russians. Vivian killed him on CIA orders. She was an asset, like me. Every death sanctioned, every crime authorized. You're lying. Are I?" Elena produced a tablet somehow still functioning. "Decode authorization, presidential findings. Your entire case is built on prosecuting government-sanctioned operations." The lights blazed back on. The door burst open, revealing Alexei and the others, free and armed with federal badges of their own. "Did you really think," Alexei said to Diana, "that we spent a year building legitimate businesses without backup? Every family member, every associate, we've all been working with joint task forces. The Kozlov Accord wasn't just about peace. It was about becoming too valuable to prosecute." Vivian's voice returned to the intercom. "The families are now federal assets, Agent Morrison. Untouchable. Unless you'd like to explain to your superiors how you tried to prosecute a 30-year deep cover operation that's been feeding intelligence to 3 different agencies." Diana looked between them all, understanding dawning. This was all planned. From the beginning. "Not all," Thomas admitted.
We didn't know about our mother's real role until tonight, but we adapted. It's what Blackwoods do. What Kozlovs do, Alexei added. What families do when they stop fighting each other and start fighting forward. Elena stepped forward, offering Diana a choice. You can pursue this vendetta and lose, or you can join us. Help us use these families' resources for something better. Your father would have wanted justice, not just revenge. The interrogation room held its breath. Finally, Diana lowered her weapon. What kind of justice? The kind that stops the next generation from needing revenge at all. The kind our parents never imagined possible. As dawn broke over Manhattan, the 5 families emerged from federal custody not as criminals, but as something unprecedented. A criminal empire turned legitimate intelligence asset, protected by the very government they'd once defied. Vivian Blackwood remained a ghost, her voice fading from the intercom with one last message. The sins of the mother are paid. The future is yours to build. Try not to need me again. But they all knew the truth now. She'd never really left. Like Elena, like all the parents who'd shaped this bloody history, she'd simply evolved from player to architect, from villain to guardian angel. Dark wings and all. The Kozlov Accord held, stronger for being tested. The families prospered, their criminal past transformed into intelligence-gathering present. And somewhere in the shadows, 2 mothers watched their children build an empire on different foundations. Not blood and betrayal, but service and survival. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was justice enough for a story that began in fire and ended in purpose. The Blackwood Kozlov legacy would continue.